There was no Ja Morant, no Trae Young, no DeJounte Murray, no Desmond Bain, and we still saw a historic performance in the Grizzlies Hawks matchup. I'm going to tell you why coming up right here, right now on Locked on Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked on Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer of the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Once again, we always appreciate you for tuning in to Locked on Grizzlies, and thank you for tuning in on today as well. Make sure you continue to rate, subscribe, comment, leave reviews so we can know how we need to improve the show, where we need to improve the show, and just leaving your remarks so we can know what we're doing well, at the same time too. But yeah, thank you for tuning in to Locked on Grizzlies. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Remember, first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. And all you have to do is go to prizepicks.com, use the promo code Locked On. Well, let me tell you who was locked on to the assignment on yesterday in the Grizzlies-Hawks matchup, and that's Jaren Jackson Jr. I mean, you've been familiar with me. I've been I've been gushing about this guy's performance through his first 11 games, since returning from his injury, because I think everything that you kind of outlined for Jaren Jackson Jr. to improve on, he's hit. That's hard to do. Usually, you say, I want a player to become better at this, and this. And you get a couple of them possibly. But you correct me if I'm wrong. I can't think of anything we wanted Jaren Jackson Jr. to improve on during the offseason that he hasn't improved on. We wanted him to, be more aggressive, right? Be more aggressive. Take advantage of those mismatches. Well, let me tell you something. He's commanding the ball right now. There are situations I'm seeing him, seal guys inside the restricted area. I mean, using, his strong lower half to get guys under the basket. He's calling for the basketball, demanding the basketball. He's getting the ball, on the corner wings, and he's telling guys, he's waving off his teammates, basically saying, get out of the way. He's demanding the basketball. Three-point shooting has been better. He's getting to the free throw line because he's demanding the basketball, because he's being aggressive, more than double the free throw attempts, from in the past right now from him as well. And then he's limiting the fouls. He's limiting the fouls on defensively. We all know Jaren Jackson Jr. has not topped 30 minutes per game in his career to date. And the main reason is because he spent a lot of his career, battling foul troubles. He's consistently been near the top of the NBA in fouls per game. But you know what? I only can think of one, possibly two games of the 11 that he's played where foul trouble has kind of crept into the equation. And guess what? Since he's staying out of foul trouble, he's able to be aggressive as he wants to be. And it just feels like a completely different unleashed Jaren Jackson Jr. We know about the offensive improvements. I'm talking about the defensive improvements. This is a guy who was first team all defense last season. And some of you were even saying Jaren Jackson Jr. deserves Defensive Player of the Year. I wasn't one of those people. I did not think he deserved that award last season. But let me tell you something. Based off what I've seen in 11 games, and of course, I've talked about Brook Lopez and Giannis, what they do, for the respective units out there, and some of the great wing defenders. I'm a big, proponent of giving guys on the wing their credit as well. But, man, this 11-game stretch from Jaren Jackson Jr. has been not only one of his best, most efficient offensive stretches, it's been one of his better defensive stretches. And when you want to talk about value, what Jaren Jackson Jr. is doing from a value standpoint right now can't be, can't be understated. We spent so much time talking about how the Grizzlies defense was struggling, right? They were, near the bottom of the NBA in net rating and in defensively, they were giving up, a high amount of points and things like that. And it got to the point it was like, these are the same guys from last season outside of, Jaren Jackson Jr. How much can he really change this thing? And you know what? I got some answers for you. Because one thing is right now, Jaren Jackson Jr., 10th in the NBA in blocks in only 11 games played. He's blocking 48% of shots he's contested. That means if you shoot a shot against Jaren Jackson Jr., it's probably you only have half a chance of that shot not getting blocked, which is completely insane. But, I mean, you already know that. Then check out this on-off stat, right? So it's all this stat that basically tells you the opponent's field goal percentage in the paint while a player is on and off the floor. Of course, Jaren Jackson Jr. leads the NBA where when he's on the floor, teams are shooting 46.3% against the Grizzlies in the paint. Off the floor, they're shooting 57%. That's a 10.8% differential, which is the largest in the NBA. The next closest is Wendell Carter Jr. for the Orlando Magic at negative 10.1% difference. But he has the biggest on-off court difference in the paint. And he doesn't just do his work in the paint. He's doing his work outside of the paint as well. And in this game against the Hawks, Jaren Jackson Jr., 8 blocks, ties a franchise record, and he was robbed of at least one. I'm going to go ahead and get that out of the way. Jaren Jackson Jr. was called for a foul. There were some people around me saying, yeah, he got his hand on his back when he had the chase down block where he knocked it off the backboard with authority. But that could have been 9. So now he's in this tie where I'm starting to think 8 is kind of a special number, around here in Memphis. 8 blocks, ties the franchise record. He ties Pau Gasol, Marc Gasol, and Stromile Swift. Marc Gasol did it once. Stromile did it once. Pau Gasol did it twice. So, in other words, this is the 5th time in Grizzlies history someone has finished with 8 blocks, but no one's ever got to 9. Jaren Jackson Jr., I think he should have had 9. They took one, away, and they called a foul on the play. But overall, another impressive showing for him. And he did this in 23 minutes and 33 seconds. I mean, it's kind of, unreal at this point. 15.7 rebounds, 8 blocks. Again, only 2 fouls. 8 blocks, 2 fouls. Anytime he stays out of foul trouble, it is a nightmare for opponents. And, he's a nightmare in the paint. He's a nightmare on the perimeter. The Grizzlies have kind of deployed him in different ways, which makes it hard for teams to plan against him, right? You can't just assume, oh, yeah, he's going to be in the paint here. He's going to be in the paint here. Let's back screen here to get him out of the play. No, they move him around. He guards different guys. And, it's a fun thing to watch, this guy play defense. And his defense was a big reason why, the Grizzlies, no Ja Morant, no Desmond Bane, no Steven Adams in this game. And, the Hawks were shorthanded as well. The Hawks didn't have Trae Young. The Hawks didn't have DeJounte Murray. The Hawks didn't have Clint Capella. The Hawks didn't have Bogdan Bogdanović, John Collins. The list goes on. This was a game where it was almost a battle of the backups in a way. But as we've seen, time and time again, the Grizzlies' backups are typically better than that of the opponents. It's not too often you can just ho-hum, bring in a point guard off the bench and give you 22 and 11 assists like Tyus Jones did in this game. Speaking of Tyus Jones, we're going to talk more about what he did and some of his other teammates because, again, the Grizzlies were shorthanded. So a lot of players stepped up when their numbers were called. We're going to talk about that more coming up after the break. But before we get to that, I got to talk to you about Prize Picks because in a game, like that Grizzlies game, Prize Picks would have been a good time for you to take some wagers on what the Grizzlies were doing. And I'm talking about, hey, look at it like this. Tyus Jones, 22 points, 11 assists. You know his numbers as a starter. You got to take the over if Prize Picks is putting him at 17.5 points, 18.5 points. Let's say Prize Picks say, oh, Brandon Clark's starting. Let's boost him up to 12.5 points. Well, he finished with 11 points in this game, so you probably should take the under on that one. But the thing is with Prize Picks, It is one of your premier wager options out there, and you can win exclusively and win good money. And remember, you're not competing against anyone. You're competing against yourself and the projections. It's you versus the projections. How does Prize Picks work? Well, you pick between 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Pick projections, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entries. And remember, it's not just basketball. It's not just the NBA. You can offer up Prize Pick projections on NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, women's and men's college basketball, that is, WNBA, even esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, whatever. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, and the best part about it, they're safe and fast withdrawals. All you have to do is download the Prize Picks app, go to prizepicks.com and sign up and play your daily fantasy sports. And remember, I can't stress this enough. If you haven't joined Prize Picks yet, I'm sure some of you already have. But if you haven't joined Prize Picks yet, there is a first-time users 100% instant deposit match. That means if you put $100 in with the promo code Locked On, instant deposit will be granted you of $100 as well. So all you have to do is enter the promo code Locked On for that instant deposit match, and make sure you go over to the one and only, and that's prizepicks.com to take advantage of this opportunity. Taking advantage of the opportunities is what the Grizzlies players did in their most recent effort against the Hawks. And, you know, I'm not surprised. I say this every single time. I wasn't surprised against the Heat. I wasn't surprised against the Hawks, and especially an undermanned Hawks team. I think, you know, the Grizzlies were pretty much the favorites, you know, because we have seen what they can do with these guys coming off the bench, whereas other teams, not as much, you know, the case. But here's the thing. Tyus Jones steps into the lineup, 22 points, 11 assists. You know, that's not surprising. 4 made three-pointers as well, you know, contributing on to his night. John Conchar, 4 or 5 shooting from the field. Again, thing I like about John Conchar is what he does, you know, all around. You get 7 rebounds, 5 assists from John Conchar as well, and no turnovers. 5 assists and a nugget on the turnovers. So that's another guy stepping into the starting lineup. Brandon Clark, 5 of 5 from the field, 11.6 rebounds. No misses for Brandon Clark. It's 3 guys right there came off the bench, stepped into the lineup, and played very efficient basketball. Tyus Jones, 8 of 14 shooting. John Conchar, 4 of 5. Brandon Clark, 5 of 5. And respectively, 22 points, 9 points, and 11 points from that trio. And it's all to say the Grizzlies have a bunch of guys who are kind of, you know, stepping up into these bigger roles. And it goes even further. It goes even further down, right? It goes beyond the guys that stepped into the starting lineup. I think, you know, this was another big standout game for Kennedy Chandler. Tyus Jones has a 2-year contract, and we know, you know, Tyus Jones is great. I mean, he continues to answer the bell every time he's called upon. But if that day comes in a couple seasons where the Grizzlies have to, you know, go in a different direction from Tyus Jones, I tell you what, they'll be prepared. They'll be really prepared with this guy, Kennedy Chandler, and what he's doing. I think he finished with 8 points in this game, 7 assists as well. 8.7 assists, 6 rebounds. I think Taylor Jenkins reminded him after the game that he was flirting with a triple-double. And I was talking to Xavier Tillman in the locker room. It's always interesting to get, you know, a big man's perspective of the point guard. And I feel like of any player on this team, maybe with the exception of Brandon Clark, you know, Xavier Tillman has the best experience when it comes to playing a lot of minutes with Ja Morant, playing a lot of minutes with Tyus Jones, and playing a lot of minutes with Kennedy Chandler. He's the one guy who can say, hey, I played a lot of minutes with this guy, and this guy. So I asked him, I was like, what's, you know, passing-wise, they're all really good playmakers, right? Tyus Jones had 11 assists in this game. We've been talking about, you know, Ja Morant recently since Desmond Bane went down, picking up, you know, 2 triple-doubles. I think he's had 5 double-doubles in that same stretch with the points and assists. So there's that, you know, for him as well. And then, Kennedy Chandler, right? Coming off the bench, dropping 7 assists. So I said, Tillman, what's the what's the difference between these guys? And I thought it was a very informative answer, and it was a funny answer as well because he talked about Kenny Chandler. He said, he's the rookie, right? So he's focused on not making mistakes when he makes his passes. Very sure-handed passes, not doing too much, things like that. Then he says, with Tyus Jones, you never know what to expect. You might get a pocket pass, you might get, a lob bounce pass. You don't know what to expect when it comes for Tyus Jones. And then with John Morant, you just expect the flair, the behind the back, the no look, all the flashiness. And as a receiver of those passes, you have to be, you have to be thinking like that when those different guys are in the game. But they all have shown the ability to be really good playmakers. And I mean, you already can make a strong case that the Grizzlies have the top two, the top point guard, rotation between Tyus Jones and John Morant. Now you add Kenny Chandler to that situation. And no, it's a lot of growing curves that have to happen here. He did have 4 turnovers in this game. This is not saying, Kenny Chandler is some finished product, but there is some validity to the Grizzlies making him one of the highest, giving him that guaranteed contract money in the second round. There's some validity to that. The explosiveness, you saw the dunk that he had, at the end of the first quarter, exploding off of, 1 foot like that. The guy has some hops. He's able to shoot the ball better than he's kind of displayed so far from 3-point range. I'm sure that'll come around as well. But then there's also Santi Aldama, right? Just a quiet night at the office. 16 points, 6 of 7 from the free throw line, 5 rebounds, 2 assists as well. And let's tone in on that before we're going to get back to Santi Aldama, but the assist numbers as well. The Grizzlies' entire starting 5 had 2 or more assists. Then you add in 3 guys off the bench that had 2 or more assists. 8 total Grizzlies had 2 or more assists in this game. They finished with 36 assists on the night. The Grizzlies are still undefeated when they get 30 or more assists this season. I think they went 17-1 last season when they got 30 or more assists. So again, sharing is caring. When that ball is moving and guys are making shots, this is a tough team to beat. They're a tough team to beat already, but when they do that, it gets even tougher. So you factor in all of those things. Going back to Santi Aldama, 16 points off of the bench. And I think, there's some joking going around, in the locker room with, hey, Jaren, Santi scored more than you, in this game. But all things considered, you really got to wonder, what's the potential of this bench? We talked a lot about, the starting lineup. Like, oh, man, imagine when Dez gets back and they have Dez, Dillon, Steven Adams, Jaren Jackson Jr, and, we still haven't seen the starting 5. We haven't. But guess what? We haven't seen the projected bench yet either. I was talking to Taylor Jenkins, a couple games ago, and he was talking about how, he's been using a lot of 9-man rotations this season, and that's not the preference. That's not what the Grizzlies have done historically under the Taylor Jenkins regime here. It's been more 10-man rotations, and we talked about it at the beginning of the season. Will the Grizzlies play 9? Will they play 10? Or will they play even 11 because they have the bodies to do that? And, you look at the improvement of a guy like David Roddy, another game where he had 11 points. Xavier Tillman comes in this game, 10 points, 4 rebounds as well, 5 of 6 shooting from the field. And those are guys that probably are going to be on the outside looking in. Because you're talking about Tyus Jones, John Conchar, Ziaire Williams. You're talking about Brandon Clark. It's tough sledding, and Santi Aldama as well. So that's 5 guys right there, and not to mention Danny Green. I think that situation is still very much up in the air on his long-term status, but there is clear value that this team sees in him by how much he's been around the team, how much time they're investing into his recovery process and things like that. But when Danny Green gets back, remember, this is a guy who pretty much just started most of his NBA career until he was asked to come off the bench some, with the Sixers last season. But he's been a regular rotation player pretty much his entire NBA career. So there's a lot of guys, and eventually those conversations will have to be had. And you know what? I got a story out right now on the commercialappeal.com where I talked about those exact same things with the bench, where some comments from Santi Aldama, Ziaire Williams, and Xavier Tillman about the potential of this bench, what these guys like and what these guys don't like. But I tell you what, seeing these performances from Tyus Jones, John Conchar, Brandon Clark, Xavier Tillman, Santi Aldama, David Roddy, and Kennedy Chandler gives you confidence. Gives you confidence in what this bench could be. And you know what? Another guy that there should be some growing confidence in is Ziaire Williams. The numbers haven't reflected it yet, but I'm going to tell you why. You should have more confidence in Ziaire Williams next, coming up after the break. But before we get to that, I want to thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies today. And for your second listen, make sure you go check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, from the games that matter to the most, to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, remember, it's available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you go to listen or watch your podcast. Locked On Sports Today is there. And today's episode is also, brought to you by Bet Online. Remember, Bet Online is your number one source when it comes to betting. And the thing about Bet Online is, again, it's kind of similar to Prize Picks in this way. It's not just NBA. It's not just college football. It's not just college men's basketball, college women's basketball. But you got MMA, you got boxing, you got all of these different types of opportunities where you can even go check out the sports podcast. You can find those as well on Bet Online. But remember, get the latest odds and the trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season coming up to the World Cup. It's all here at betonline.net. You can head over to the website, or you can do it on your mobile device as well. And don't forget, BetOnline is where the game starts. The game started for Ziaire Williams a couple games ago, and it's been kind of some struggles, right? Nothing out of the ordinary when you see a player returning, from injuries and things like that. Ziaire Williams is still working his way back, and in this game, finally got some more extended playing time, which was big for him. 20 minutes and 55 seconds, basically played 21 minutes, but shot 1 of 7 from the field, 0 of 4 on three-pointers. And, he finished with 4 points. 1 of 7 from the field, 0 of 4 on three-pointers, finished with 4 points. So, remember, this is a guy I'm high on. I know a lot of other people have high on as a guy who could potentially, be a starter on this team one day going forward. So, I was talking to Ziaire in the locker room, and I got some time to just chat with him a little bit, and thought he had some interesting things to say. He did say sometimes there is rust when he's playing right now, and that's expected. Again, it's completely expected, but to hear the players say it, kind of confirms what we think our eyes see it. Sometimes he said sometimes when he gets in certain situations, he locks up. It's still, working out those kinks. It's the conditioning things. It's all of that is factored in. But you know what? The message from the coaches have been very clear to Ziaire Williams, and that's continue to be aggressive. They don't care about his stats. They don't care that he's shooting 1 of 7 right now. The main thing that they're doing right now, they want him to get minutes. They want him to get his recovery after the game, and they want to know that his knee feels good. Those things, if those lines are checked off after each game right now, the Grizzlies are fine, because they know eventually Ziaire Williams, what he's shown, his capabilities, is he'll be a plus player off of this bench. And, I think we've touched on it in the past. One thing that you get from Ziaire Williams is the addition of a guy who can play, in those pick and roll situations. He can play in those pick and roll situations and help out, Tyus Jones. We see with the starting lineup, right? John Morant, he can be in pick and roll. He can go look the scorer, make for teammates. Dylan Brooks, same thing. Desmond Bain, same thing as well. But if you go over to the bench, it's not as many guys. Tyus Jones usually is the main guy running the pick and roll. And once you factor in, everyone else is, there's a lot of ball movement with the second unit. There's still, a lot of, hard rolling from Brandon Clark. I think he's one of the better rollers, to the rims in the NBA. And he puts a lot of pressure on teams, which creates a lot of, corner three-point shots because you have to honor Brandon Clark rolling to the basket. So they still get really good shots. But Ziaire Williams talked about it himself, wanting to provide a different look for the opponents. So I think, that's just something I wanted to throw out there. Ziaire Williams is working his way back as well. He said, there is some rust there. I think he'll be fine in the long term. We don't have an update yet on Steven Adams, Ja Morant, and those guys, but I will get those to you by the next episode. We will have a better indication on Steven Adams and Ja Morant and their status going forward again this upcoming game against the Milwaukee Bucks, which should be a big one. But thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you continue to tune in to Locked On Grizzlies, but make sure you go check out Locked On Sports today for your second listen. Remember, all you got to do is go check out Locked On Sports today to get the biggest stories of the day. Then you get the instant reactions, the big game recaps, and those big takes of the day. So it's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you go check out your podcast. Locked On Sports today is there. Thank you again for tuning in to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Me and your co-host, Joe Mullinax, should be back with you for the next episode. And we got a pretty good, juicy topic for you. Tune in. So make sure you tune in for that episode as well. But once again, thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Damichael Cole, and we'll see you next time on Locked On Grizzlies.